Hi, my name is Samantha Aguilera, and today I will be discussing a peer-reviewed journal called Formal Rights and Informal Privileges for Same-Sex Couples. Now, to introduce this, the title, like I said prior, is Formal Rights and Informal Privileges for Same-Sex Couples, Evidence from a National Survey Experiment. Now, it was published November 19th, 2014, and it looks at the differences in attitudes from heterosexuals and same-sex couples in terms of attitudes about the formal rights and informal privileges for these groups. It looks at sexual prejudice between the two groups and how that comes into play. So some background about this journal, some keywords that popped out were heterosexuals, same-sex couples, formal rights or legal rights, and informal privileges such as interactional and subtle advantages. Now, the study was performed in the United States, which is important to mention. We're not looking at these interactions outside of the United States or in other countries. It's just done from interactions seen in the United States. There is modern-day prejudice. The unfortunate part is that they're now harder to identify than the prejudice that was occurring many years prior. And the study identified descriptive statistics such as sexual identity groups, education, religion, etc., things that kind of form that baseline. So let's talk about the research questions, and this was taken directly from the journal. 1. Are people more willing to grant partnership benefits to heterosexual couples than to same-sex couples? 2. Are they more supportive of public displays of affection by heterosexual couples than by same-sex couples? 3. Do people view marriage more similarly to formal rights or informal privileges? And 4. Do these patterns vary across heterosexual, lesbian, and gay respondents? In terms of the hypotheses for this, there were about 6 or 7 hypotheses, so I wanted to condense it down. For the formal rights, heterosexuals either favor in-group couples or heterosexual couples, or have no difference between either heterosexual couples or same-sex couples in terms of approval for formal rights. Same-sex couples either favor in-group or same-sex couples, or have no difference between either heterosexual couples or same-sex couples in terms of approval for formal rights. The informal privileges. Heterosexuals favor in-group couples over same-sex couples in terms of approval of the informal privileges, and same-sex couples do not have a difference between in-group couples and heterosexual couples in terms of approval of the informal privileges. So looking at the methodology for this, we're going to start with the design. This was done quantitatively, and it had a pretty large sample size of 1,073 participants, and this was done based off of the 3 different groups like I've said before. So we have the heterosexual group, the gay group, and the lesbian group. So it's people who have identified to be within those categories. And then the questioning was done based off of vignettes. The data was pulled from a nationally representative data set and was collected from that. And it was done based off of a random subset from a GFK, or Growth from Knowledge panel. And this was collected in 2010. Now, the limitation of this is attitudes may change. So as time goes on, attitudes may change, may sway, may falter. So that's a limitation that comes into play. The outcome measures. So it looks at the willingness of the couples to engage in a public display of affection, or PDA, and it looks at the opinions on marriage. Now, some predictors of what may happen at the end of this experiment are sexual identity and vignette interaction indicators. So how did these groups initially interact with these vignettes? And sociodemographics. Some analytic strategies, one major one being examine the outcomes using an exploratory factor analysis, or EFA. So let's talk about some of the main findings. The first big one was based off of the vignettes and how the participants responded to these vignettes. So it looks at dependent measures and the group rating based off of the strongly agreed, which is 4, all the way to strongly disagreed, which is a 1 with the vignettes. So we had strongly agreed at 4, agreed at 3, disagreed at 2, and then strongly disagreed at 1. Now the first 4 measures are higher for lesbian and gay couples, while the bottom 5 are higher for heterosexual couples. So the family leave, hospital visitation, inheritance rights, and insurance benefits, those all played a higher importance and more strongly agreed with the lesbian and gay couples. Whereas tell others, hold hands, kiss on the cheek, French kiss, marriage, that's almost falling within the PDA aspect. It's more agreed upon by the heterosexual couples. Main findings number 2. So now this is looking at informal privileges versus the formal rights. And remember, formal rights are the legal rights of things. It's the givens. The informal privileges are what is accepted. Now this shows if the group feels that the measure is more of an informal privilege or a formal right. So is this something that should be given or has to be given? Heterosexual couples and same-sex couples actually tend to feel similarly about these measures. So you'll notice that family leave, hospital visitation, inheritance rights, insurance benefits, they're more of a formal right for both groups. Now, formal rights for heterosexuals, you'll also notice that tell others are in that category, but for lesbian and gays, not so much. It more so falls as an informal privileges for the two groups, and then thereafter holding hands, kiss on the cheek, French kiss, marry, all of those seem to be informal privileges, and that's agreed upon between both categories. So in conclusion, looking at the way the vignettes went and then how the measures were looked at by the groups, heterosexuals do not favor heterosexual groups and couples over same-sex groups and couples when it comes to the formal rights. However, they are less approving of the informal privileges for same-sex couples. In terms of the same-sex couples, there's opposition of formal rights that are more likely to wane prior to informal privileges. And then they're more approving of the formal rights for in-group couples than for heterosexual couples. However, they are less approving of PDA for their in-group couples. So they're not as approving of the PDA for same-sex couples. And then in terms of gay rights movement, what's needed to eliminate this prejudice is to create more frames, strategies, and goals, and that will just come with time. In terms of future research, the authors suggest that a reevaluation of attitudes on the formal and informal rights may be necessary. Attitudes change over time, and as economy and society progresses, attitudes will change as it progresses. So a reevaluation of those will be necessary. Future research may be able to identify that respondents are identifying with their sexual identity groups, so having a more definitive answer as to which groups feel in which ways. And then the authors did mention that this is the first kind of study like this. This is the first of its kind. So as more research is done, it will lead to more understanding. This is my citation. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.